So as we look at the story of that the Bible lays out from Old Testament to New Testament, we have a situation where there's two acts in the first part of the story and a third act here in the New Testament. And we have this curious problem of 400 years in between the first two acts and the third act. And this leads to the question of why. Why do we have this 400-year silence? What's happening? Is everything just peaceful and wonderful? Like, what is going on in this, and why does God wait so long? And is there anything that is going on to set the stage for the final act?
So at the end of the Old Testament, you've got the Israelites been dragged off to captivity and stuff like this, and there's this promise that they're going to be returned to their land and things of this sort. And that's kind of about where we're left at the end of the Old Testament. And it's not peaceful in this 400 years, and there's lots of chaos, and there is a return, and I guess that's really where we're left off. And what happens at that time is they're the people of Israel are subjugated to Greek rule and horrible tyranny and things of this sort. They even have some success, I guess, in rebelling against that tyranny up to a point. And then the Romans come along and take over in that role of tyranny, and that kind of sets the stage for where we kind of enter the New Testament.
Okay, and so we have a lot going on in this 400-year period. And if we look at some more of the details of what's going on there, we have, if we go all the way back, we have an Assyrian Empire that's kind of starts the captivity process for Israel. We have a Babylonian empire that kind of takes that over. We have a Persian empire that comes along, and then we have Alexander the Great that comes along with a Greek empire. And then Alexander, unfortunately, dies before he can do much ruling, and his kingdom gets split up into four pieces. And there's two of those pieces that end up kind of ruling over the Jewish people. And the first part of that is the Ptolemies, and they're out of Egypt, and they have a rule that's pretty favorable to the Jewish people. And then we have the Seleucids, and that is completely the other situation where they murder about 40,000 Jews, just massacre them. There's a situation where a pig is brought into the temple and slaughtered there, and really their worship is largely driven underground. And then there's a rebellion that takes place in the Maccabees. There's a period of self-rule there before there's infighting that goes on. There's rebellion and civil war, and that's where the Roman Empire finally comes in and says, well, enough of you guys, knock it off, straighten up, we're going to rule you because you obviously can't get along with each other. Can you speak to any of the developments during this time period that are important and set the stage for the New Testament and what God is going to do in the New Testament time period?
So part of it is you've definitely got the nation of Israel once again is in subjection. Mm-hmm. You've got the rebuilding of a temple, though, that also takes place somewhere around like negative 40 something or other BC. Mm-hmm. It starts and is completed shortly before Jesus arrives on the scene, and that's important. Mm-hmm. But you've got people who have been looking for the coming of the Messiah, but then you've got people who just want to be out from under Roman rule. And so when people who are looking for the Messiah, some are looking for it as a way to get out from under Roman rule, and it really kind of leads a lot to kind of miss the actual coming of the Messiah.
So we have a situation where Israel is yearning for their own rule. How does that set the stage for Jesus and maybe cause some problems?
So it's funny because they're yearning for their own rule. They're yearning for the Messiah, as long as the Messiah does exactly what they want him to do in terms of giving them their own rule. Mm-hmm. But it definitely caused some problems for Jesus when Jesus arrives on the scene. At the end, we get this idea that one of the high priests says, it's better for one man to die than that the whole nation perish. And mm-hmm. They view Jesus' assertions as actually dangerous for their desire rather than realizing that it's the fulfillment of God's plan.
Yeah. So there's an interesting situation there where they're yearning for a king, and Jesus shows up as a king, and yet it doesn't work out the way that we would think. One of the other things that of course happens during this time is that during the Ptolemy kind of rule, you have the beginning of the synagogue kind of system, and that corresponds to kind of a diaspora of Jews. How is that important in the New Testament tale?
So, the synagogue system came about because at the time of its origin, there's no temple, and if there's no temple, there's also no sacrificial system going on as well. And so, it's interesting, to this day in the Jewish system, there's still no sacrificial system, and now again, there's no temple. As of like 66 or 70 AD or so. And so it sets kind of the table that Jesus gets to become the ultimate sacrifice, and that there is no other sacrifice now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the other things that's interesting is when you look at the spread of the church, there's a diaspora of Jews that are kind of around the Roman Empire. They have synagogues. Paul always goes and starts with the synagogue, and that's usually the seed of the church, which then there's Gentiles grafted onto. There's so many things that happen, and we wouldn't think that all this political intrigue and infighting and everything is necessary, and yet at every step we see that there's an importance to what's going on to really set to the perfect setting for this final act to take place in. So we have a number of other things that go on. First of all, we have Alexander the Great and his coming through, and it's really interesting that he is able to conquer so much of the world, but then immediately dies. Do you see any hand of God in that, and why is that important?
I see some importance in terms of much of the world becoming Greek, and you get this common language, and it's the language of the New Testament, obviously, as well, but it's also having this common language. It makes it very easy for the gospel and its newness to spread.
You get a number of different rulers that then interplay between that and the Jewish people. I think that kind of sets the stage. You have the development of the political parties in that take place. Like if you look in the Old Testament, you don't have scribes, you don't have Sadducees, you don't have Pharisees. You know what I'm saying? You don't have.
Okay.
And this gets set up during the intertestamental period and the time of these different rulers, these different Greek rulers coming and going, and it's there's a very complex system at play when Jesus enters into it. And we'll see all these characters as we study the New Testament. We'll see the fact that the Pharisees have one view and the Sadducees have another view, and they're both trying to recruit Jesus kind of against one another. And then when that doesn't work, there's a kind of going to be an alliance of some sort against him. And all these things are very, very fascinating, and we'll see how they play out later in the New Testament. Finally, we have the Romans, and they come in, and they definitely have a part to play in this intertestamental period. And what do you see happening with the introduction of the Romans as far as really setting a stage that the New Testament could take place in?
So more so than at any other time in history previously, the Romans kind of set up to make the world interconnected. They built roads throughout their empires and stuff like this, and you get trade and commerce and communication to a degree that's really never been seen before. And so that's kind of the backdrop in which really the church is built. And so at one point the church is scattered out of Jerusalem, but you see in the journeys of Paul and some of the other missionary journeys, you just see this network of cities and places that they can kind of spread the gospel to. That's really built by the Romans.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of interesting things in that where you have a Greek language that's through most of the known world is makes the story of the Gospels accessible. You have the ability for missionaries to move around through the world because of the Roman Empire and what they've done. You also then have a foil. The Roman world is, in some sense, in some ways, kind of the height of civilizational technology, in a sense. you've never seen a people so organized and so good at creating empire and ruling empire. And so you have this kind of city of man that's a great foil for the city of God.